in the U.S., it is actually illegal to not put your child through conventional cancer treatment if they're 18 or under. And we didn't know that. We really truly thought we had a choice and that we were going to be able to make a decision. Are we going to treat him conventionally, or are we going to take it and do it alternatively? And we were told very quickly and very sternly by our oncologist that you don't actually have that choice. You have to stay in the hospital. You have to walk him through conventional treatment for the next 3.5 years.
Welcome to the Wise Traditions podcast, sponsored by the Weston A. Price Foundation for Wise Traditions in Food, Farming, and the Healing Arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health.
I'm your host, Hilda Labrada Gore. This is episode 126, and my guest is Susan Johnson, the founder of the Kick Cancer Movement. Kick Cancer is an organization that supports parents whose kids have been diagnosed with cancer. Cancer is that terrible word that no one wants to hear, let alone when it is spoken in relation to one of our children. Susan's own son, Kicker, was diagnosed with leukemia when he was a very little boy. And Susan, a nutritional therapy practitioner, thought she knew what to do to keep people healthy. So when Kicker was diagnosed, she had to get over some initial shock and guilt. And she realized quickly that she was going to have to work harder than ever to help her son. So she learned to support his health while he was on chemotherapy with nutrient-dense foods and detoxification protocols. She tells us today specifically what foods promote and support good health and a better quality of life during and after cancer treatment. Most importantly, Susan shares her story with us, describing what she's learned all along the way. Before we get into it, we want to recognize our sponsors. The Wise Traditions podcast is supported in part by Kraut Pounder. Do you make your own ferments? You're going to want this beautiful tool made by Kraut Pounder. It does just what its name suggests. It is a handmade piece of maple that is unique and perfectly crafted for preparing your ferments. So get yourself a Kraut Pounder from krautpounder.com. And listeners like you. Your donations and membership contributions help support projects like this podcast. So thank you so much. Welcome to Wise Traditions Season.
Thank you.
So your son, Kicker, was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia in 2013. Take us to that moment. What was that like?
Yeah, that was definitely a moment that we won't ever forget. And it's really molded and shaped the last 3.5 years of our life and facilitated a lot of growth as well. But it was really humbling because, I was a nutritional therapy practitioner. I was just trained and educated to use nutrition and supplements and detoxification and all kinds of natural remedies to really support the body's healing processes. And so my job was essentially to help keep people from getting cancer and getting sick. And so to have my own son, who was otherwise such a healthy little boy, to learn of this diagnosis was really humbling. And of course, it actually made me really question everything that I had learned. And I went into this space of why did I go to all this work to feed my family healthy and do all of these things? And I quickly had to snap out of that and recognize that, okay, I have these amazing tools in my toolbox. And so now we have this opportunity to really use them and put them to work and see how I can actually take this diagnosis and just keep his body so healthy through the process of treatment.
I can understand why you were thrown for a loop. Here you are, this NTP, like you said, preventing people from getting cancer and keeping people's bodies strong. And your own son was diagnosed with this disease. How does that happen? What did the doctor say? Does anyone understand how a child would be diagnosed or come down with leukemia?
It's interesting, and I still question that to this day. There were so many factors that I tried to pinpoint that I wondered what contributed to that. And, if we step back and look at just statistics with leukemia and with blood cancers in general, there's a pretty big correlation between blood cancer and radiation exposure or electromagnetic frequency exposure. And so we look at that and we think, gosh, the amount of EMS that we're exposed to on a daily basis now and radiation that we're exposed to. I think people think that radiation comes from when you're getting cancer treatment, you go in for a radiation treatment. And no, we're talking about radiation that comes from your blow dryer, from your refrigerator, from, of course, your cell phone and all these different things. So we know that that's increased substantially the amount that we're exposed to. And so when we look at that correlation between blood cancer specifically and radiation, it answered a few questions. And with our case in particular, like I said, he was actually really, really healthy. I mean, never had any type of medication, never been to the doctor except for our chiropractor or a natural doctor, and ate incredibly healthy. He went from breast milk to bone broth and just a really nourishing Weston Price diet. And what was interesting is when I was 14 weeks pregnant with him, I had an emergency appendectomy, and we were told that we had a really good chance of actually losing him when they removed my appendix. So we had to sign a bunch of paperwork that could happen. And of course, it was pretty devastating to be put in that position, but there wasn't really an alternative. So I did go under general anesthesia for that, and they removed it. And he, of course, was fine. And then I also had an emergency C-section. And I wish I knew now what I knew then. That was before my schooling with NTP and really didn't understand a whole lot of just the body processes. And I didn't know the support to get to have a really good, strong pregnancy and delivery. And so I can't help but think that could have something to do with it. The 2 times being under anesthesia, we understand too now that a lot of times antibiotics are administered after a C-section just as a preventive, basically. And so I think that plus what's interesting is we did live in an apartment building when he was conceived in the city, and it was a really large complex. And so EMS exposure just constantly. So all of that said, though, I do have to say that I had to kind of step away from going, what did I do wrong, or what caused this, or what could I have done better? Because that just gets you into this spiral of blaming yourself or blaming what you could have done differently. And I just had to go, okay, we're seeing more and more and more kids diagnosed every single day. I mean, it's estimated that almost 16,000 kids between 0 and 19 years will be diagnosed with cancer in the U.S. in 2018. There's some people that say way more than that. And so we know that those statistics are getting higher and higher. And so what are the things that we can do to help maybe prevent it, but also to really just support the body through cancer treatment?
So you're not saying parents have to go all natural to fight cancer. You want to offer helps to families so that they can make choices that will support their kids' bodies, even if they go through the conventional treatments.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because we didn't know that in the U.S., it is actually illegal to not put your child through conventional cancer treatment if they're 18 or under. And we didn't know that. And of course, with my background at the time, being an NTP and having this incredible surrounding of other practitioners that were natural practitioners, we really truly thought we had a choice and that we were going to be able to make a decision. Are we going to treat him conventionally, or are we going to take it and do it alternatively? And we were told very quickly and very sternly by our oncologist that you don't actually have that choice. You have to stay in the hospital. You have to walk him through conventional treatment for the next 3.5 years. And at first, I was so horrified and I was so angry. And again, here's my child who's never even had children's Tylenol, and they're going to just pump his body full of all these toxins. But I will say 2 things. One, I do believe that chemo played a role in his health. I have to believe that, of course, right, mindset-wise, but I do believe that it did. And I will say that now looking back, we walked through the same treatment that all the other kids in this country that get diagnosed with cancer, we walked through the same treatment that they're getting. And we watched how food, supplementation, detoxification, essential oils kept him so healthy through that. And so it gave me a voice among these other families to bring hope. And if we would have walked away and left the country and did something alternatively, I don't really feel like I would have had a voice to share with these families that if you implement a real food diet and all these things that we teach alongside conventional care, oh my gosh, your child can thrive through cancer. They can have this beautiful quality of life.
So you established this Kick Cancer movement to offer these supports to the families, right? Because like you said, the statistics are alarming. Each day, I think your website says 45 children are diagnosed with cancer.
Yeah, and so we decided here we're watching our son truly beat the odds. I mean, they measure his absolute neutrophil count through treatment, and that really is what tells you what the immune system's doing. And the doctors were really frustrated because in 3.5 years, they never saw his absolute neutrophil count drop. And he was comparing to a healthy individual that was not under cancer treatment. I mean, his immune system was so strong, which allowed him to not have side effects from treatment. And he played soccer, he skied, he did all these things that a normal little boy would do. And so when we started to see this, my husband and I said, we have to get this information out to other people. We can't just keep it to ourselves. And so we started the Kick Cancer movement. And basically what our job is and what we feel really compelled and convicted about is teaching families how to eat a real food diet, how to use natural remedies like at-home detox methods and essential oils and supplementation to facilitate the body's healing process while they're walking through treatment to give them that quality of life. And we do a few things with Kick Cancer. We hold a yearly retreat where we bring families in from all over the U.S. We've even had families come from Canada, and they spend a weekend with us, and we bring people who specialize in nutrition, detox, self-care, emotional health, essential oils, all of these different aspects. And these practitioners teach these families through the weekend how to implement some of these modalities alongside their treatment. And we're pretty excited this year. It's going to be a little bit different. We're going to have our retreat in Hawaii. And here's why. We learned just through some connections with some other cancer families that Hawaii has the most kids with cancer per capita in the United States.
Are you kidding? That sounds so surprising to me. I would think the island would be such a happy, healthy place far from EMFs and all the other things that may assault our health.
Right? And it was really shocking for us to learn this. And we think that it has a lot to do with Monsanto. You know, the sugarcane, the pineapple, and there's so much that's happening over there that they're using the islands agriculturally and being sprayed with pesticides and the runoff into the ocean water. So there's a few things that I'm not going to claim to know exactly what it is. But because of that, we partnered with another foundation, the Kurt Suzuki Foundation. He's a professional baseball player for the Atlanta Braves, and he has this deep passion for helping kids with cancer. And he saw what we were doing, believed in it, and said, we want to help you facilitate getting Kick Cancer here. And so we're going to do our retreat in Hawaii this year for Hawaiian families or anybody, who, of course, who wants to come. But I think it'll be a really powerful event and something, again, that we've seen. What happens is not only do these families leave our retreat feeling empowered, right? They feel educated, they feel empowered, they feel that there's hope. And there's things that they've learned that they can immediately go home and do that isn't going to cost them a bunch of money. But also they get to lock arms with other families that are walking in a similar walk of life, and they build a community through that. And we know that that's so important, right? Just having community. And that's with Weston Price. It's one of my favorite things is you get to hang around and get to know like-minded individuals who are just as passionate about this real food movement as you are.
Absolutely. And we will put a link in the show notes, both to the Kick Cancer Movement website and information about that retreat so people can access that. I want to ask you now, Susan, about the 4 elements or modalities that you all offer, which I actually think are so amazing because they sound great for families who are struggling with cancer and those who are not. So let's go through those 4 things. I think nutrition is number 1, right?
It is, obviously, right? Because we know that that's really the building blocks of the body. So we teach them about diet. We teach them how to implement a real food diet. And, you know, it's really surprising that so many of these families just have no idea about real food. They think they're eating the standard American diet. And what's worse and really frustrating is that our hospitals are teaching them worse than the standard American diet. When we went into the hospital, we were given a plate of food, and it was horrifying what was on there. It was potato chips, food coloring Jell-O. I even blocked it out of my mind. I can't even remember how horrifying it was. And when I asked our oncologist, just purely out of curiosity of his response, what do you recommend our child eat through this treatment? And when they said, whatever he will eat is fine. And they actually said a calorie is a calorie is a calorie. So as long as he's getting calories, I don't care if it's chocolate cake, French fries, he just needs to eat. And it was at that moment that I realized, okay, not only are these families coming in just thinking they're eating healthy because they're eating the standard American diet, but their doctors are also telling them that. So we recognized immediately that has to be the foundation. We have to teach them, start with breakfast with a real food diet.
So what would that plate look like? What would that real food breakfast look like, Susan?
So eggs, of course, are one of the most nutrient foods that you can play around with. And as long as the child doesn't have a sensitivity to eggs, we talk about just cooking some eggs in butter and maybe even just doing some cheesy eggs. Most kids, they like cheese. And so scrambled eggs cooked in butter with some raw cheese or organic cheese if they don't have access to raw cheese. We always encourage them adding some sort of fermented food at each meal. So maybe it's a fork full of sauerkraut or some raw pickles, maybe some kefir if they have access to good quality kefir, if they can make their own, and veggies of some sort. So we'll sneak in. My kids are so jaded. They've grown up on a Weston Price diet, so they don't know any different. And so it was easier for us. We could sneak in some spinach, things like that in the scramble. But Another option is we teach them, okay, their kids are really, really picky. And so what is their favorite breakfast that they like to eat? Maybe it's cereal. So we tell them that they could do raw milk with some homemade granola, and we provide a recipe for some homemade granola that's made out of nuts and seeds that have been soaked, adding some, raisins to sweeten it up or whatever that looks like. They don't have access to raw milk, then of course we have a lot of videos teaching them how to make coconut milk. It takes 2 seconds. It's so simple. And so we try to show these families that it doesn't mean they have to go on this like crazy juice salad diet, right? When you talk about healthy eating, that's what people assume. And so we show them, no, why don't you tell us what's your favorite meal or what's your kid's favorite meal? And we'll show you how to make that healthier.
Coming up, Season talks to us about the importance of detoxing while undergoing cancer treatment. It eliminates dead tumor waste and helps avoid a reoccurrence of cancer. We want to pause now and recognize our sponsors. Kraut Pounder. Have you ever tried making your own ferments? You must get yourself a Kraut Pounder to do so. Kraut Pounder makes beautiful pieces for the process. Each Kraut Pounder is turned from a solid piece of maple, natural hardwood. They each have their own unique markings and are finished with natural walnut oil. The design for the pounder was inspired by a Kraut Pounder that belonged to a grandmother of a member in the Eugene, Oregon Weston A. Price chapter. So go to krautpounder.com and get fermenting today. And listeners like you. Christian Elliott had this to say on Apple Podcasts. This is the best health podcast you will find. In this noisy, confusing world of diet and health information, learning from the Wise Traditions podcast feels like you've finally hit bedrock. The interviews are thought-provoking, clarion calls to better health, and they hit the sweet spot between unbiased science, practical application, and abundant hope. Thank you so much, Christian. This means a lot to us. We need your encouragement to keep going. So everybody, please rate and review us on iTunes and send a donation to the foundation and share episodes and tell people about the show. There's so many things you can do. Just choose between these ideas or do them all. They each give us what we need to persevere and continue producing this Wise Traditions podcast. And thanks so much. Now let's go on to the next modality, natural detox. How do people go about that?
Yeah, this is super important. And I think it's one of the areas that I'm praying that Western medicine will start to understand just the importance of incorporating it through treatment. So they're getting this chemotherapy, radiation, and it's killing the tumor. But then what you have in your body is dead tumor waste. And this dead tumor waste isn't being pushed out effectively because the doctors aren't encouraging us to detox. And so then we have this high rate of recurrence with cancer, especially in kids. And that's the biggest fear, for a cancer mom or any cancer patient is the idea of recurrence. And when we are really intentional about actually pushing the toxins out while we're in treatment, simple things, detox baths, castor oil packs, rebounding, on a trampoline, these are all things that kids can do, and it's gentle, but it's super effective, and it's pushing the dead tumor waste out, but it's also helping get rid of those effects from the medication. Chemo, one of the most common side effects is nausea. Well, it's because the liver is so burdened with the chemotherapy and the dead tumor waste that you're going to naturally become really nauseous. And so when we teach them how to push those toxins out using essential oils to detox, and that's so simple because we're telling the parents, just put a little drop of oil on the bottoms of each foot. Cilantro essential oil is really powerful at pulling out heavy metals. When we say detox, people get a little bit intimidated thinking it's this intense regimen, but it's really not. It's simple, effective ways that we've seen hundreds of kids, we've seen their liver enzymes drop dramatically, and get back into healthy range just by implementing some of these really gentle but therapeutic detox modules.
Help us wrap our heads around the dead tumor waste. I don't really get what that means.
So when you kill a tumor, so let's say, for example, with chemotherapy, you have the chemo go in and its job is to kill cancer. Unfortunately, chemo can't discriminate. It kills everything, but it will kill the cancer cells. And so then you have these dead cells in your body. And now we do have a natural detox system, right? God created us with this incredible ability to detox naturally through our kidneys, through our liver, through our skin. But the problem is when we're burdened that much with an onslaught of these heavy doses of medication, and then also taking into account that I believe, just from research that I've done, that one of the main causes of cancer is an inability to properly detox in the beginning. So right away that your detox system, they need a boost so that we can push out these dead tumor cells or dead cancer cells that are just sitting in the body. We don't want that sitting there, right? It's toxic, it's dead, and we want to push it out.
So it's like all those treatments kill it, but they don't eradicate it. They don't eliminate it from your body. So you need to help get it out of the body.
Right. And the best example I give people to help them understand this concept is conventional cancer treatment today is similar to your check engine light on your car going off. Okay. Your check engine light goes off and you pull into the auto shop and you say, you know what, here's the deal. I don't really have time to deal with this. Can you just turn the light off? And they go in, they break something in there to turn the light off, and then you go off on your happy way. And I feel like, with no disrespect to oncologists, because you have to have such a big heart, and I know they want to help people, their hands are a bit tied, but you go into conventional medicine and treat cancer, and what they do is they cut, poison, and burn, but they never address the underlying cause. And so then we're left, you are considered, quote, cancer-free. They send you on your way, but then what happens? You're sick for a while because of the treatment, or the cancer comes back because we never address that underlying cause. And so detox is such an important piece of that.
You have so many stories of folks who've come to the Kick Cancer movement with their children. I'm sure you have good stories and then stories that are harder where the child doesn't make it. Is that right, Susan?
There's so many beautiful stories and testimonies of sometimes as simple as a mom emailing me and saying, our daughter got to leave the hospital. She stopped vomiting. And they were able to take out her feeding tube because we just used a little bit of peppermint essential oil and let her smell it and put it on her belly. And now we're home. Something that simple. Or we have somebody that says their lab work all normalized and they were able to stop treatment earlier because things stabilized, their lab work stabilized, just really powerful testimonies like that. And then we've had some beautiful experiences at our retreats where we get to know these families and they implement these methods that we've taught them, and their quality of life becomes so much better and just so significant. And then we have families, actually one of our board members, Cheyenne, she's now, of course, we consider them family. Their daughter, Delaney, was diagnosed with a really aggressive bone cancer when she was just about a year old. And little Lainey fought for about 4 years. And we got connected with them right about the time that we started Kick Cancer. And they immediately started implementing everything they learned. Cheyenne shares so beautifully on our video that's on our website about how as soon as they started using these methods that we taught, Delaney, she was back to her normal, healthy, happy self. And even though her body was riddled with cancer, she was a happy, healthy little girl. And unfortunately, Lainey was healed in heaven. She passed, and Cheyenne says it's so beautiful that Kick Cancer didn't heal her daughter, but that's not what our job is. Kick Cancer's job isn't to heal people. Kick Cancer's job is to give parents and families the tools and the resources that they need to just bring a better quality of life and to help them thrive through cancer treatment. And that's what we watched little Lainey do. She just had this beautiful life of health and happiness, even though she was covered in tumor.
I saw images of Lainey on your Instagram account, and she did look like a happy, healthy child. And I'm sorry for that family's loss, and at the same time grateful for what you're doing.
It's hard. There's so many times that my husband will tell you that he'd be the first to say that he's like, okay, we have to stop. We just have to shut this down. Like, I don't want to go to another little kid's funeral, or I don't want to have another phone call from another mom. I take on that emotion. It's so real. And every time I get connected with another parent, I relive those moments that we went through in the beginning. And it's exhausting sometimes, and it's so hard. But I also know that the reason that we walked through this with our son was purely for the purpose that, we had this beautiful foundation with Kicker. His health was so good going into his cancer diagnosis, and it's because we fed him well and we supported his body from when he was born. And so God knew that, he can handle this, and I know that you're going to turn this into something that's going to help other people. And so we don't want our suffering for the 3.5 years of going through this with our own son to be in vain. Like, we really truly feel that part of that was we have this calling to help other people and to give them hope and resources through it.
And Susan, how is Kicker doing today?
He's doing amazing. In fact, I'm watching him out my bedroom window. We got a big snowstorm last night, and he's sledding down the hill, and he's the happiest, healthiest little boy. I mean, even through cancer treatment, nobody believed me when we'd have to fill out the waiver, for ski team or for soccer. And it says any medical conditions. And so when I would write cancer, you can imagine the looks on some of the faces of these people. Like, what? Are you serious? He has cancer? And he's so healthy. He's so happy. And we're so grateful.
Well, Susan, we want to have you on again, and we want to talk to you more in depth about essential oils. That's not a topic we've covered on Wise Traditions. So would you be willing to do that?
I would love to.
Excellent. Well, thank you for giving us your time today. Thank you for the work you're doing with Kick Cancer. Again, we'll put the links in the show notes. And I have to finish up with one last question that I ask all of my guests. If the listener could do one thing to improve their health, what would you recommend that they do?
You know what? I would say that they change their mindset to live 15 minutes at a time. It's because when we live 15 minutes at a time, we're not guaranteed the next 15 minutes, right? And when we live in that moment and we're so present, we can't help but be joyful and try to just completely take full advantage of those 15 minutes and live it out the best that we can. And that does so much for our health, even when we're not feeling well. I just think having that mindset and adopting that mindset through life will just give us so much more hope and joy.
Susan, thank you so much. I'm going to go live 15 minutes at a time. I'm serious. I think that's fantastic. And I wish you guys all the best on your vacation that's coming up.
Okay. Thanks, Hilda.
My guest today was Susan Johnson. To connect with Susan and learn more about Kick Cancer, go to kickcancermovement.org or susanjohnson.com. For the full show notes with highlights from this episode and links to resources we mentioned, just go to the westinaprice.org website and find the show notes for episode 126. If you are enjoying these podcasts, go ahead and subscribe through Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app so you don't miss a thing. And please rate and review us on iTunes. It will let others know that this show is worth a listen. Finally, you can follow the Weston A. Price Foundation on Twitter and Instagram at Weston A. Price. And you can find me at Holistic Hilda on Twitter and at Holistic_Hilda on Instagram. Next week, everybody, we get to hear from farmer Paul Grieve from Primal Pastures out in California. He talks about how regenerative agriculture does the most amount of good for us, for the health of the land, and the health of the animals. It's a fantastic conversation. You are not going to want to miss it. I want to thank my friends at Podcast Village, Rob Ford, and I do have a team of interns who are helping me out: Cynthia Castro-Cohen Enriquez, Joy de los Santos, Amy Marvin, Lily Hempt, Mary Hine, and Olga de Villiers. Thanks, everybody, and keep listening.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with others. Post a link on Facebook or Twitter, or send a link to a friend in an email, or simply review Wise Traditions on iTunes. Sharing the podcast is one way to spread the important message of health through nutrition. Wise Traditions is brought to you by the Weston A. Price Foundation for Wise Traditions in Food, Farming, and the Healing Arts. The content of this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for medical advice.